Bojo, Anin, Danse, Violet Okamau Indigenous, Omimi Ziping Nidonji. I would like to welcome each and every one of you to our Indigenous Language Revitalization panel. Before we begin our session this evening, I'm going to ask Lyndon Agnes to come up and do opening comments.
Good day, everybody. My relatives, my people. I'm honored to be standing up here. Language is very important. Without it, we don't have an identity. And it's kind of hard for me because there's less and less people that I talk to in my language now. A lot of the elders are disappearing in our community. And the only ones I really speak with is my mom, my siblings, and some of my friends. We're at a sad state. You know, we're trying our best to revitalize our language and to try to bring it back. I teach a course in Stony. I have quite a bit of my students there. There's about 10 of them there. Yeah, say hello, everybody. The reason why I teach it too is because the government that tried to take that away from us, they took away our language, our spirituality, our way of life. We're at a sad state because of that. In our language, it shows a lot of respect. I'll give you an example. If I'm speaking to a woman, it's different than how I speak to a man. If I'm speaking to my sister Loretta there, I'll be saying, Durikina. You know, it's got that respect. If I'm speaking to my brother Eugene there, I'll say, Durikina ho. You know, it's different how you speak man and woman then. Our language, as it dissipates, so is the respect that we once had, a very respectful language that we have. I'm sure all Indian languages are like that. A lot of people like to use the word indigenous, but, you know, everybody's indigenous to a land, a language somewhere. It doesn't have to be here. They could be indigenous to China or to France or whatever. But I still like to use the word Indian because when you look at our treaty documents, it says between Her Majesty and the said Indians, right? There's no Aboriginals there, there's no natives there, no indigenous. So I like to try to keep everything as original as possible. Ishnish.
Miigwech, Lyndon, akawetish ainiwi kit apijinimenendam omakkinanongom kabijaik. Anishna apichikitendagon kigigidoininan. Megay kituat ugeteadizik. Ukitatizik, egawi kachiwani keang, jijanishna bemwing. I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to our Indigenous Languages Revitalization panel this evening. Before I introduce the panelists, as I would like to read the land acknowledgement. We honor the land on which we stand as a traditional territory of the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, and Anishinaabe nations, lands that are now known as part of Treaties 6, 7, and 8, and homeland of the Métis. We recognize and acknowledge Indigenous values, traditional teachings, ways of being, contributions, and historical inequalities and respect the sovereignty lands, histories, languages, knowledge systems, and cultures of our Indigenous nations. The Supporting Indigenous Language Revitalization Project at the University of Alberta started in 2021 as a community-led participatory 5-year project enabled by BHP Foundation to provide support to Indigenous nations and communities to successfully carry out their language revitalization efforts through the coming generations. Language is the fundamental way Indigenous people share their knowledge, communicate their understanding of the Indigenous worldview, and connect with their spirituality. Miigwech, hi for joining us this evening for our first Indigenous Language Revitalization panel. The purpose of these events is to bring together and listen and learn from language warriors, such as our panelists here, who are making an impact in their respective community or communities. Miigwech. I'm going to introduce each of the panels, and I'll read out their bios. First, we have Simon Bird, a father of 2 and husband of 22 years to Naomi Bird of the Thunder Child First Nation. Simon is Rock Cree member of the Peter Ballantine Cree Nation, a language advocate and fluent speaker of the Y, the TH, and the N dialects of Cree. Simon is also a learner of the L dialect and Anishinaabe-Mwin. Simon has a background in education as a teacher, principal, and education director. Currently working in First Nations policy development with the Assembly of First Nations. He is pursuing his PhD in Indigenous language revitalization at University of Victoria. In his spare time, he is a content creator, sharing ways to engage learners using social media. And I think everybody on Facebook knows Simon. He's promoted language in many different ways. Check out Facebook groups with the other 250,000 plus members of Cree Simon Says. So welcome, Simon. Next we have Dr. Kevin Lewis. Dr. Kevin Lewis Wasakayasio is from Ministigwan Lake Cree Nation in Saskatchewan. He is currently an assistant professor in the Department of Curriculum Studies at the University of Saskatchewan. Kevin completed his Ininu Pimatsuin Kiskithamawin doctorate program from the University of Blue Quills in Alberta. Kevin was instrumental in developing and is the lead instructor for the Indigenous Language Certificate Program in the College of Education. His research interests have been in Indigenous knowledge systems, second language acquisition methodologies, Cree roles in tradition parenting practices. He's also an active Oskabewis whenever called upon. Dr. Kevin Lewis has worked with language teaching programming for the University of Alberta, the University College of the North, First Nations University of Canada, and the University of Saskatchewan. Kevin assists the Government of Canada in an official capacity as a Cree language interpreter and translator. His ongoing research project has been running over 21 years and is based around Cree language immersion programming and a land-based education program through a nonprofit called Kaniasik Cultural Camps. So welcome, Dr. Kevin Lewis. We also have Doreen Daychief. Doreen was born in Rocky Mountain House, Alberta, on Sunchild First Nation. As a child, Doreen grew up with 2 different languages, Cree and Anishinaabe. Ancestors and great-grandparents who were medicine men and women and held ceremonial lodges and taught her an abundance of traditional knowledge and protocols. And they originate from a sacred place called Manitou Lake, near Marsden, Saskatchewan. She also wrote here, I also have family ties to North Battleford, Saskatchewan region. As a young mother in 1984, I decided to return to school to acquire a GED, which I completed in 1 year. I began my university journey in 1990. From here in 1992, I graduated with a Health Development Administration University certificate, which included management classes and professional development classes. I decided to go and work for my community as the health director. In 2002, I went to university and graduated with a Bachelor of Arts through the Athabasca University and went back to work. In 2013, I decided to pursue a master's degree in Indigenous languages and graduated in 2016. The journey of my master's included a tour study in New Zealand of the Maori people and their reclamation of revitalizing their Indigenous languages. During my tour of New Zealand, I had the opportunity to visit 8 schools to see firsthand their work with language revitalization. Today, you can find me in a sessional language instructor, as a sessional language instructor at Yellowhead Tribal College in Edmonton. My goal is to help First Nations revitalize the diminishing Indigenous languages in a good way. So miigwech for that, Doreen. We're going to start with Simon.
Thank you very much. It's a real honor to be here. So I'm going to try and set up a little bit of my reality and why I do what I do. This slide here is my pride and joy. Negosis is 6'7", and Nitanis is stop growing right about there. My wife of 22 years, as mentioned, from Pitugonak, they call it, Thunder Child, is a Plains Cree family, and there's a little bit of a list there. The reason why I have to list all these fancy things, which I think is a little bit on the bragging side, I don't mean to, but it just seems like this day and age, in order to have a bit of a voice, we sometimes have to do a little bit of the latter. And everything that I do in my presentation, it's always been boiling down to our grassroots and some of my most enduring teachers in my life. One of the things that I want to do, I'm going to take full advantage of the brains that are in this room. If you can help me out with any kind of material, I see a natural connection between language and governance. I love this map. Every young person should always look at Turtle Island in the same manner. You don't see any provincial boundaries. You see the natural waterways, our traditional highways flowing from the east to the west. You start to understand why our dialects in Cree have so much in common and why we have Oji Cree the further east that you move. You start to understand Anishinaabemowin. Everything that I do, I try to see what we have in common. I think there's enough people out there that specifically look and focus on the differences. What I try to do, certainly on social media, is try to focus on what we have in common and definitely respect the differences that we have. And that dot right there is the land where I come from, certainly, a place we call Wapahtigochoanok. Wapahtigochoanok means the narrows with the current. Talk about decolonizing the way we see things. I absolutely see this circular seasonal calendar as one of the things that we have to keep in mind. The very important addition to these 4 seasons is the ice. The ice, it's breakup time, and of course freeze-up time. Very important for our northern people. And then you start to understand why there's a difference between the months of the year that you would see in a white dialect calendar and another northern calendar that depicts the 12 months of the year. An example, we call Migisuipisim. To the plains is February. To the north, Migisuipisim is in March, a month later when the eagle returns back to its nesting grounds. Again, this is something that you still see today in my family. Just take a backpack. You can spend more than a couple nights out there with the essentials. The black and white picture is how my father, Nutawi, grew up in a very small community, log cabins. So my father's generation were the first generation in our community to come off the land and start living in the community full time. That doesn't mean that they didn't have seasonal camps. That just means that my grandmother's generation were the last ones to live out in the land full time. This is a picture of Notawi. This is a picture of Nigawi. And these are some of the activities they definitely celebrate. A lot of hunting, harvesting, and still today, dog mushing. This is my community when I was growing up. It certainly exploded, twice the size, and you can see that the narrows with the current. We live on an island. There's a story that goes with that island. If you take a look at the little line between the narrows there, you see the bridge, and you look further down the stream there, that's where my grandmother preferred to live. She lived in the center of the community. That was just too uncomfortable. Something that I find so fascinating, our community members thought the town site had too many issues, too many people, too much of this. Talk about colonization, and that's exactly what this picture I see happening. That's Nogum. Nogum Pan is my first teacher, and she was the first person to really help me understand the compassion, the worldview of our people before they settled into our communities. One of the things that you see here is a river. Remember that big map, traditional highways? That's what connected our people. It was not unheard of for winter camps, summer camps. You move around with the land in traditional territories. So that's why it's very difficult and quite ignorant when we ask our elders, where are you from? Well, do you have time? I'm from this community and I'm related to these people and this is where we spend our time. So that's one of the things that we have to think about when we start asking these questions and may not expect to spend the time receiving a quality answer. And of course, when you have a river system that naturally flows, it naturally replenishes itself, that goes to the way a person thinks. And what the community system started doing was it started damming and started pooling these, instead of a river flowing through, replenishing every spring, every time it rains. What happened when our community started forming, our reservation system, is this mentality really start to stop. This tolerance, this welcoming of differences, different dialects, this appreciation for different knowledge. I'm sure a number of you absolutely hate the reserve down the road or the First Nations community down the road because it's something that maybe hockey presented, I know in the 80s, 90s, oh, we got to get those guys, Muskeg Lake, we got to, go after them. So a lot of that competition introduced a disassociation with how we were connected. This is my ongoing project in terms of matriarchy. I absolutely believe that we're seeing here at the center is of a basic governance system boiled down at the family level. In the center was my grandmother. You see the 6 seasons. The outside of this flower, you see the 12 months of the year. Really, they should be 13, but I'm keeping it at 12 for this presentation. And you see all these different activities throughout the year, different teachings throughout the year through these roots, these branches, all connected to this flower. That's what I'm working on. I absolutely believe that language revitalization has to have capacity, and a lot of it comes in different forms. Any institution that continues to push for language revitalization is absolutely on the right track. Thank you.
We thank you, Simon Bird, for your presentation. So we have Doreen, Daychief.
First of all, I would like to say that my grandmother was adamant about us not losing our languages. Before she died, she was over 100 years old, and because her birth wasn't recorded, it was recorded at 103, but she was older than that. She had a natural diet, and she didn't get sick. She didn't have cancer. She didn't have diabetes. And that's from living off the land and using natural medicines. One of the things that she taught us as we were growing up, first of all, I like to say that she raised us since we were 7 because both our parents were killed in a car accident. My mushum and our gokum raised us. And from then on, we traveled to ceremonies, and we have relatives in Saskatchewan. That's how we learned Cree. Gokum also had Anishinaabe parents. We learned how to speak Anishinaabe. So one of the profound things that she used to teach us was the Creator gave us our spirit. The first and number one highest gift that you can receive as a person is your spirit. With our spirit comes our languages. With the spirit comes our identity. And with the spirit comes the culture. I can see where our culture was lost. We all know our history in all our communities and throughout Canada due to residential schools and day schools. But I'm not one to stand here and blame the system, because today we have the opportunity for language revitalization. because there's still a handful of us that are teaching the language on a daily basis, and there's still elders out there that are doing ceremonies and praying for us on a daily basis. And that's the unique thing about all of our nations, is that we have one thing in common. And that one thing in common that we can use on a daily basis is prayer. So when we use our prayers, we pray to the ancestors. We pray to the Gokums and Muslims. I did that this morning knowing that I was going to be speaking here this evening. I asked my Muslims and Gokums, please stand there with me. Help me to tell the truth and to relay this message. A few years ago, we were in a lodge and the grandfathers said, we need to teach our youth, we need to teach the young ones our language, because it is who we are as a people. The Creator gave us our language, the Creator gave us our way of life, our way of believing, our beliefs, our traditions, and things like that. Why it's so important? We see it in all our communities, how lost our young ones are. I was at an elders gathering at Manitou Lake in September, and we had 35 plus elders there. And it was just a few days after what happened in James Smith. The elders said, it is because we have forgotten who we are as a people. We have forgotten how to be proud. We have forgotten our way. From there, I knew that this important work of revitalizing our languages is so important. So every day I pray for that. And so do the elders that I work with. And I've been working with these elders for 50 plus years now. The other thing I want to mention is that when we do our ceremonies, the grandfathers and the grandmothers are there. Where we feel them the most is at the sacred places. And that is why I want to tell this story about Manitou Lake. That's one of the sacred places on earth. Because the elders that I work with have always said that within these sacred places, ik de mitetik atayokanak, ik de mitetik mosomnak, egogokumnak. That is where our grandfathers and our grandmothers are. They always sit there waiting for us. So when we go do language revitalization, I invite people, students out to Manitou Lake, and that's where we've been doing workshops for the last year or so, because that place is so sacred. Just some quick stories where I'm standing there, that lake behind me. An elder shared a story where the elders went and did a tobacco offering. And as they were standing there praying, the water rose up in the form of a man. That's how sacred that lake is. And it is said when the buffalo were being annihilated, that's where they went into. There's another realm under that lake. And that's where these sacred places are. They have doorways. They have portals. And to believe in that, we need to go back to what the ancestors and Muslims and Gokums have taught us. Because it is who we are as, for lack of a better term, indigenous people, Nehiawak, Basimuak, Nakawinwak, all of us. We need to remember who we are. We need to acknowledge our spirits, and we need to acknowledge our languages, because the language is within the land. You hear elders speak of you be quiet, and once you get balanced, once you reconnect yourself with the land. You will hear the trees talking. You will hear the birds talking. You can hear nature out there. A month ago, before the snow came, I was walking in the backwoods in Calgary with my young daughter. And she said, "Mom, I want to go show you this place." So we went back there. When it's really quiet, we can hear the trees talking, she said. Oh my goodness. When we reconnect with who we are and we acknowledge Mother Earth and all living things, because we are all related to all living things, then that connection gets stronger. Yes, we live in cities, we live in towns, but nature is still there. There's the river that flows here. I lived in the city here for 4 years. I used to go down to the river, tobacco offering, because that's the number one protocol when you ask for guidance or help. Tobacco first. Ego nigan. Im staksat stemau is what they say, is what our Muslims said. With ceremony, there was a ghost dance in Sunchild in September. And during our ceremonies, there's elders that'll stand up and share their visions and their dreams. This one elder stood up and shared one of his dreams, that one of the little people came to him. That little person said, "People are forgetting who they are. People are forgetting who we are. People are forgetting about all these things that Mother Nature has to offer. We need to go back. We need to reconnect. We need to remember these things." That is why so many young people are being lost, because we never taught them the language. We never taught them our culture. So that was the story of the little people that came to him. And when we did a pipe ceremony, there was 4 of us ladies that did a pipe ceremony. And later on, we asked in a lodge, did we do things right? The grandmother spirit said yes. A long time ago, when little girls reached womanhood, already they were shown how to do pipe. And so were the young men too. There's so many teachings that have gone underground and that have been forgotten. Luckily, some of us, some of our families still remember those teachings and are teaching the young ones. So this place, this story about whistleblower, Pipigonga Potata. So I imagine the translator got this word from the native person, so that's where this name bugler come from. Because back then, all they did was blow that horn. So whistleblower Pipikonga Potata is the same translation. When I was in Manitou Lake last summer, I happened to run into one of the facilitators that was doing a healing workshop. His name is Reggie Bugler. He was one of the descendants of this old man that's in this story. And this is a true story that came out of Manitou Lake. So this story was finally written back in 1997 by a person named Jack Gopher. This story originated before there was any reserves and before there was any real settlement that happened around Manitou Lake. So this story was passed down for generation after generation. It was finally written down in 1997, and this is a true story. This trapper was out looking for what his traps held. And that one day he came across one of his traps where there was a silver fox. He was happy, and right away he thought, oh, this is going to bring lots for me and my family. It'll help me look after them for the winter. So he checked his other traps, and pretty soon his sled was full. And when he was done checking all his traps, he started his journey home. And he decided to cut across this creek so his sled would be easier to pull. So as he was going, in the distance he seen 3 figures. And he was waving up, that's it. And then they wouldn't answer him, so he kept going. And as he was near them, he seen that they were little people. He asked them again, what do you want? And they wouldn't answer him. He said, well, if they're not going to talk to me, I'm going to go around them. And they blocked him. Okay, I'm going to go around the other way. They blocked him again. So he yelled at them, what do you want? Finally, that one spoke to him and said, we have something that we want. What's that? The trapper said. You have that silver fox, and we're wondering if you can give it to us. The trapper said, nope, this is for me and my family. And the little one said, what if me and you wrestle for it? And the trapper was a big man, and he said, yeah, this should be easy. So he took off his jacket, and after he was done taking off his jacket, they grabbed each other, They wrestled. And next thing you know, he's on his back, this trapper. But he wasn't going to be given up that easy. So he jumped up again, grabbed that little man, wrestled, and then again he was on his back. And then when that was going on, he heard another voice, Boyok, Boyok. Then he looked back and he seen another little man. This one had white hair and a white beard. That little man was yelling at those 3. It happened to be that those 3 were his sons. The little old man was yelling at the son, why are you guys bothering this human? You know that when you bother a human, you're supposed to give him something good in return. Why are you guys bothering him? The one that was wrestling told him, Father, he has something that you've always wanted. He has a silver fox. Remember you said you always want a wrap or a coat? You always wanted a silver fox? Oh, yeah. He turned to the trapper. You have to come with us. If I'm going to trade you, would you be willing to trade with me? The trapper said, they're probably not going to let me go anyway, so I might as well get something out of it. So he said, yeah. And then that little old man told him, you have to come with us, though. You have to come to our home. Then we're going to show you what we're going to trade you with. So they went on the side of a hill, and on the side of the hill was a doorway. The little old man told her, you have to come into our home so we can show you what we're going to trade you with. Okay. The trapper went into the doorway, and they kept him in there for 4 days. So the first day, they taught him about horse dance ceremony. They taught him about horse dance songs. Second day, they taught him about Sundance. They taught him about Sundance songs. The third day, they taught him about spirit travel and how unique the spirit is, how it can move in a blinking of an eye, or as soon as you think something or a place, you're there. How profound, how fast the spirit is. On the fourth day, they taught him about medicines. After they were done the fourth day, the little old man told the trapper, okay, you go home now, and you go and clean and prepare this fox fur. And when you're done, when it's dry, you'll come and put it here. I guess there was a rock on the side of that hill. So the trapper went home, and he cleaned it, and then he brought it back. When he came back to that place, there was no one around. But he still put it where that little old man told him to put it, on top of that rock. And then a chopper went home, and the next day he was curious, he came back, and that fox fur was gone. According to this story, he continued to go on to be a good medicine man. He did horse dances, he did sun dances, and he cured a lot of people of illnesses. So this is the true story that I think must be shared. I had given Reg Bugler the proper protocol, a gift and tobacco, to share this story because it's so important. And lo and behold, in September, one of the elders from Sunchild told that story where the little people were saying that they were being forgotten. Because they too have an entity in which they live in. They too have a purpose to help humankind, as is the rocks, the trees, and the other animals that have been given to us so gracefully by the Creator. My reason for telling this story is that we need to go back to believe what is out there, because it is out there. Every time we step on the land, and especially when we go to these sacred places, even if we just put tobacco down by a tree, Witsehin, kam skaitaman ni pikskon, Witsehin, kam skaitaman awi nania, awi no mania, I see no. Like, put tobacco down. Help me who I am as a person. Help me to learn my language. There's a number of other stories that I've shared with my students. I'm glad to see them here. But I would like to end it at that. And ask them to know gakyo. Hi.
Doreen, miigwech for sharing those teachings with us this evening. So next we have Kevin.
I'll stand up, but I'd like to thank the organizers. I'm very honored to be invited as well to come up, talk about things that have sort of like, if we're in a business of land revitalization, it's kind of like a lifelong commitment is what we're into. This is us going into Wapstawanion, which is, having white hair eventually and having that long life. When we reach that, in our way, we're rich in our culture. I always use Indian control over Indian education. I'm glad that there's a couple of policy analysts here and talk about them for a bit. As far as assessment goes, it's a really good one to look at, especially when you have a story like that. And those are very sacred stories. And this is one of my tricks, actually, is what she just pulled off here and telling about Atayohyo. Because it's the time to tell. It's the winter time, and Mother Earth, as the old people say, she has a white blanket on. Things are resting, right? So it means we can say Wisagitsak, no problem without looking around. Is it going to show up? So these type of things. And a good, cool thing to use, even in Norway, Nisaso, if he ever goes back, is to ask about the little people over there, right? Because they're all over the world, these things, If you go to Ireland, he's a little fighter, and this little guy. And then over here, they're all over the place. They keep the water. And the good spin on this one is, when we were smaller, there was no way I wanted to see a little person. I was like, no way, I'm going to be close to home, I'm not going to go to the lake. I'm not going to go to the water. So they're actually used in a really good way as well, where respect and reciprocity was used. Not to laugh at them, but be respectable, right? So there was hard lessons in some of those atayuhana. But this one is a cool one because it has a twist to it, because there are relatives. They're little relatives, and they looked after us in time of need, right? So I bet you in COVID, and I don't know how many people maybe tried this, but I know I was drinking skunk juice. I don't know if anybody else was. Yeah, there's a few hands up here. Yes, good. As far as knowledge transfers go, you know, yes, I work at U of S. And I'm glad and we traveled all over the place to hang out with those elders. That was my doctoral process, was to hang out with elders, learn and sit with them, learn pipes, learn this rattle. What the heck is this rattle? That's a different rattle. You can't use that rattle all over the place, only certain places. So you can read this rattle. Chicken dance songs, horse dance songs, sun dance songs, ghost dance songs, all of those ceremonies, beautiful ceremonies. Kamateito, right? This beautiful ceremony for us to try to make it another winter, right? Winter is just starting and we're like already, those giveaway ceremonies have started in our territories. And Pagagos, that one, you know, the skinny man that gets so pitiful, skinny, gets blown all over the place with the wind. That real skinny guy. And gets thrown all over the place. It's our genie in a bottle story. That's the one. And if you ever find one, and it's screaming and hanging in a tree somewhere in a bush or somewhere in Antoyagotse, and it's screaming, and you're supposed to go there, and if you're like me, you'll run the other way. I'm like, holy smokes, what the heck was that, you know? But for the brave ones, right, they say, go to it, go help it, and in return, it's going to help you. It'll take care of you. It'll gift you something as well. So again, you know, this is what I got to hang out with. And when I got to hang out with Kogum Mushum, you know, and I got to meet his late Uhumpana, I got to meet her. And she was so giving with medicines, right? She was so giving and caring and just gave freely this knowledge. And that's what I got to hang out with. And the more I hung out with that, the less and less fear I had of, like, don't go to that ceremony. It's evil. It's bad. It's no good. Matcha, you know, all that talk. I was like, and then when I go into ceremony, I'm like, holy man, this is beautiful. This is my kind of people that I want to hang out with, right? Just like this group. This is a very easy room to talk to because, like, you see all the faces here. You guys want to learn languages. I do too, you know, so let's lift this up and you know, to do it all together. So again, the teaching opportunities, they're growing out there. That this doctoral process that we went through, it was done in an old residential school. That's where we went through the process of going into this red brick building, you know, that was supposed to break us down, take the Indian right out of us. And I was there as a freelance interpreter when the Pope came and he said, boy, I'm sorry, guys, you know, the church, we were involved. I'm sorry we sexually abused you. We're sorry we physically abused you. We had a part in that. And the government too, remember, they're apologizing every chance they get right now. They're saying, hey, we let it happen. We're sorry. You know, let's work this through. And then this Jody Raybould Wilson, she, if you can, go buy her book. Or if you're like me and I like listening to audiobooks, I just upload them and when I'm driving or doing chores or doing stuff outside, I'll listen. She's got some really good steps on reconciliation. And she even says this, even if you haven't reconciled or even haven't conciled yet, even if you're there, not even like, let's not even talk about reconciliation. We haven't even conciled yet. We're still working through this relationship. There's still steps for you, right? And one of them was dealing with our histories and our curriculum and knowing our songs, our stories, our ceremonies. Another thing too is self-care. That was the last bullet on the other one, is look after number one, right? Especially during COVID. During COVID, when we were in our bubbles, I'm like, oh man, geez, you know, boy, I miss hanging out with people. Like, I hate this bubble stuff, you know? And then I started learning songs. I started really praying, meditating. And then this is exactly what the old people said that this bear does. Nyugataisin, the four-legged human, the bear, kan Togosamot piek tipskau, one night in Togosamot. And in this time of what science says hibernation, they're doing exactly what we did in COVID. We hung out, we prayed, we slept. Maybe some of us put on a little bit of this, right? But we missed people. And then Piek Tipskau is one night. So that means that summer was their day. Maybe I said something that I wish I didn't say. And then they meditate, they think, they feel, geez, I should have did something. They're praying, they're singing down there, they're learning, and then they study from in that, where they are in that den, and they're studying medicines from below up. And then when they come out the next day, it's a brand new day, new summer, new spring. Boy, we're just celebrating us Cree or Anishinaabe. We celebrate when springtime comes because we made it through a winter. And when you ask anybody in here, like, how old are you? How old are you? We're asking, how many winters are you? How many did you make it through? How many, right? So that's another thing that we teach when we started creating a non-for-profit group, Kanyasa Culture Camps. We couldn't light our smudges, we couldn't light our pipes in our school, our reserve school. And we weren't safe. It was just like, hey, you can't do that stuff here. No, that's some other stuff. Don't put it over there. Maybe leave it at home. Don't sing those songs here. Do it over there. Just like it wasn't us. It was just like so foreign, this education system that we're just educated right here, right now. You go to Spitak, there's stuff over there. So we said, okay, we'll take it over there, right? Because there's a lot of people that didn't get a chance because of policies, because of laws, because of residential schools, because of all, 60 scoop, whatever it is. They didn't get a chance to listen to these songs about these, or listen to these stories about little people. And then never mind the big people, the thunder beings, the Kisagaupis, the sun, right? The wind, all those four-leggeds, all of them, there's so many of them. And then there's half beings, Kaapi, Topi, Suutik, the half thunder beings, right? And then if you go up into Nisasa, where he's from, there's half water beings up there that are our relatives, by the way, right? Hiwagutama. So we keep our waters clean, our mountains clean, our forests clean, and the plains clean, because they're relatives all over the place. So again, this is what we teach. So the school is there, and the close one over here is the school, and the far one is the culture camp. We incorporate and we want Indigenous researchers. Get this cool thing. So we went to New Zealand, and we went to go see our whakapapa, right? Our family. That's what family, it's not a swear, it's family. But that's how they say it in Maori. But every chance I get, I'm like, whakapapa. Just it's not my language, my second language. So these are Maori, what they do is they started capacity building, just like, all of us that are going to school. And they started getting educated. Those people went home, and the capacity that they built, the research that they did, they incorporated that into their communities. So it's Indigenous researchers in studying Indigenous things to benefit Indigenous people and communities. What a formula that is. Hey, isn't that an amazing formula? So this is what's happening here right now. This is why we have this SILR. This is why we're having Zoom classes that are becoming almost normal. Every week you'd almost log into a class of some sort dealing with our languages. Isn't that awesome? Current design, all year round. We're going all year round during the summertime. And this is what I mentioned. We try to dog sled as well. I think the Inuit were the dog sledders. We're actually pretty good dog sledders ourselves too. And we want to continue it. But now we need to figure out ways to fund these. All right? So we need to figure out how to fund places and gatherings like this. So this is a funding model, fundraising, financial literacy, and not always depending on the government. we need to do it ourselves as well. We can't wait for them anyways. We shouldn't wait for them. Last thing, mental health. We need to practice a lot more mental health, especially during COVID when we're in our bubbles. We need to figure out what's in here because this is so complicated. This little organ up here is so complicated, and we're just at the edge of this thing, like right at the tip. And I can't wait till more people are publishing. And this is our QR code. You can find us, just point your iPhone or whatever it is onto this QR code, and then magically it'll be like, okay, go to Mala. So visit us, contact us that way. Thank you, and then please contact us that way, and then contact us in any way you can.
Miigwech to all three of our panelists this evening. Thank you for your knowledge and the teachings that were shared this evening. We now have some questions that we want to ask each of the panel members. So the first one is, in your own words, can you define Indigenous language revitalization, or what does language revitalization mean to you?
Language revitalization, in my own words, for me, it's always been a circle. This is another dissertation. It's taken me a long time to formalize a lot of these thoughts that I've been thinking about since I was a little boy. That circle can definitely be displayed in many ways and at many levels. For an example, more than half of the things that you see displayed on the social media site, it takes technical know-how. A young person helped me with more than half of that. That young person doesn't speak fluent Cree. That young person helped me make a bridge to people on social media using technology. The people that help in other ways financially, that to me is a system of language revitalization. The people that occupy space in institutions, in corporations, in governments, that to me is a level of, it's a form of language revitalization. But the most important circle for language revitalization boils down to those small circles involving families, as I mentioned in the model that I had. It was shared with me long ago that if you're going to lose your language everywhere else, the last place you should lose it is in ceremony. You should not compromise. The words, the terms for fire, matutsan, the lodge, or any other ceremony, what you were asking for, you should make sure that these things should at least be retained in those sacred circles. So I'll just leave it there.
Language revitalization I'm seeing on the big screen. We'll just use that for an example. And did everyone see Pray, by the way? When that came out with Predator. But that was done in all Comanche as well. So if that doesn't talk about revitalization, that means Disney Plus is listening. That means industry is listening. That means the United States or these movie producers. And I don't know if you guys seen Bruce Lee talk Cree, but but he does, and he fights in Cree, right? So again, those type of things are, I think that's what you're starting to see visually. And I'm gonna say a crystal ball in January 2023, there's probably something that's gonna come out in January 2023, and you're gonna hear Nihiaon, the young lady that's gonna be on the big screen, and she's gonna be actually speaking in Cree. And when you have people looking up at the big screen, they're looking at movie stars, people that are changers, that are gonna motivate, that are gonna be role models, right? So I think that's gonna be another big year.
For me, language revitalization takes each and every one of us to acknowledge who we are. When working with the elders, they say, "Ega tawan gisksieg, oinagiawa, Awi nagiano. Never forget who we are, and do not forget. I've done some research also, and I'm curious about how other nations are trying to revitalize their languages. And at the same time, I compare their beliefs with ours. And I'm talking about the different nations. So I did some research on the Navajo Nation, where an elder was talking about language. And he said that when there is no one left to utter the sacred words, to utter the sacred meanings of our language, that's when the third world is going to be cleaned. I thought the third world, and I went back to what some of my elders had told me about creation story. Each nation and each and every one of us have our own creation stories. For example, Turtle Lodge, where it's at Sagin First Nation, Manituapit, that's another sacred place. When we acknowledge these sacred places, then we can begin to understand who we are as a people. Then it would be easier for us to connect with who we are as a people. And I have to say this, we need to heal a lot of our nations from the past traumas. And I believe that language can heal that in many different forms. And for me, that's language revitalization.
Miigwech, Doreen. I'm just going to skip over to another question here. How have your Indigenous language revitalization experiences and beliefs influenced your community or your current workplace?
When I speak my language, this life-loving Giam person comes out. That's where I am. But when I go into a school as an administrator, I have to make sure that everybody is safe. And then I take a look at the classrooms. Are they safe? I want to make sure that each and every space is going to be conducive to the top needs of what parents have entrusted us. So going back to your question here, how has Indigenous language revitalization experiences and beliefs influenced your community current workspace? It is a bit of a separation because you almost have to switch a cap. Our language does not operate very well in a very structured, formal manner, hurting people in there that don't want to be there. Kids put into classrooms in this size of a space that come from a restless night, homelessness, addictions issues, coming in here, the last thing they want to do is pay attention or listen to somebody, and because somebody over there is laughing, joking. So it becomes a very structured practice, and the last thing in our schools happens is the learning. That's quite different in universities. You're there with people that want to learn. Now, which gives an opportunity to programs such as Kevin's. It's a magnet program. It's a center of excellence. And that, in my current role as the director of governance, again, here you have this social media personality, and then this guy you would never think to be so serious. I have to absolutely be serious because I meet regarding policy. I meet on a weekly basis with Indigenous Services Canada that are looking to find, I'm going to say respectfully, shortcuts for the basics that every First Nation should have to be able to operate with the capacity to have an effective governance system. I have to wear that hat. So it's like no BS. I got to fight for every word within a policy because I know at the tail end of the quality of a document is a child, is a family, and they need that support accordingly. So that covers my range of roles and my current role, but the school system is absolutely my favorite place to be, because the kids are the ones that have that absolute essence of giving that energy and curiosity, and they give a lot of hope to that next generation and what they can do in terms of bringing up that language. So all it takes is sometimes a small seed, and that's what I do in social media. Is I ignite a small conversation. Where it goes, it really is up to the individuals.
Just to echo on what Simon said, I think it's like creating a safe space. That's the number one thing that we all need to do, is like create a muy papito, right? Not to laugh at each other, not to tease each other as those learned behaviors that they had in residential school. I went to residential school, and I went to Duck Lake and St. Michael's in Duck Lake, and then White Calf Collegiate in LeBret. And then I ended up working 15, maybe 20 plus years at Blue Quills, right, at a residential school. So again, I think, and I know the stories, and I know the habits, I know things that were taught, I know things that were taught there that went home, to our communities. So number one thing is safe place. Another real positive thing is this thing called language engineering. I really love that idea, because what it means is this computer, these wireless mics, if you use our language, you should be able to put together and explain what these are without having like a really long hippopotamus word, like a little word, but it's wireless. You can talk about this thing that's wireless, that's a computer, looks like a TV and a typewriter. And with our language, you can engineer new words, right? So that's positive. Another thing is technology is, here's a really cool stat, and I don't know if I mentioned this, but I know I talked about it just before I got here, actually. The alpha generation. That alpha generation is 0 to 8. That's what the alpha generation is called. In 2016, 0 to 8, there was 11,000 speakers. And then this time around, and again, these are kind of skewed because they were done during COVID times, and they probably weren't even allowed on the res anyways, where a lot of our speakers are. But there's two little interesting things there. 28,000 plus, and I'm going to say 28,750, but don't quote me, but I know it's 28,000 plus that have said, yes, our kids are speakers of an Indigenous language. That's threefold. That they tripled the number. So meaning it's either somebody that went to residential school or never had a chance to go take any of our languages, and then they had a grandchild and they're like, hey, there's this school and there's like language programming, you're gonna take this because I never got the chance. So again, we're having opportunities like this. So hopefully there's a lot of administrators, which there are in here, a lot of students that are in here. Let's raise them better at home as well, right? At home, keeping it at home. So I think that's probably all I wanted to talk about.
First of all, I'd like to thank the First Nations universities that are doing their best in developing these language programs. 10, 20 years ago, we didn't have any of these language programs in our schools. So I'd like to thank them for all the work that they've been doing. I was privileged to help YTC develop the language program there. And we used Indigenous thought. And again, as we were going to grade school, we never learned about any of these maps or any of these initiatives. But now we are. And I think through technology, like recording stories and recording the languages, that will help us to further our journey into language revitalization. So like Kevin said, "Kamamo kamatwa." We all need to work together to save our languages. We all need to work together to make these things happen. And look at us here tonight. We are listening, we're participating. Our spirit is sitting there, and it's going to remember. Maybe it triggered someone. Maybe it helped someone remember. And that's about planting seeds. Hi.
One of the last questions that I'm going to ask is there anything else that you would like to highlight or that you would like to share?
One of the things, again, I'm currently doing via social media is just creating that spark of dialogue. Back in 2015, I was the superintendent of education in Stoney Nakoda in Morley. And my little girl came in and she was proudly speaking Nakota. I was so proud of her, but that also shared how much little time I was spending to teach her Cree. I said, "Mio gisigal," and she just laughed and laughed. And, what's so funny? It sounds like you're saying, "May you kiss a cow." I shared that on Facebook. Thought it was genius. Of course. It's a mnemonic. It's an easy way to remember Miogisigaw in a wide dialect, meaning it's a good day. It kind of snowballed the whole social media. I hear these stories, and these stories encourage me in terms of people saying that, I didn't know that. One of the best stories that I have is of a young man. He was 18 years old. His name is Cameron Adams from Gimli, Manitoba. Didn't know a word of Cree, and then came across that Mayo Gisikau. He started exploring his own identity and realized that the last living speaker in his family was his great grandmother. And this summer, he spent time at Kevin's camp. And this guy's very impressive. He's still a young man, 2015, that's 7 years ago. And he speaking the language because a small plant, a small seed was planted, and I take no credit for the amount of work that he did connecting with family, language keepers, taking language classes. But today, I met Cameron in Winnipeg. I visited him. We had coffee, we had breakfast, I think it was breakfast. And he said, "I'm gonna order all in Cree and you're gonna translate for me." So he spoke all in Cree and I translated for him, and we were talking to this waitress, and then all of a sudden this person from Pipunapiwinik, northern Manitoba, says, "What you guys are doing is so impressive. I'm gonna start doing that with my kids." And then we told the story about Cameron, and they said, "Do you know this guy? Didn't speak a word of Cree 7 years ago, and he was fluent." That gives hope to the people that do the different levels, not to discount what you do, but stay the course. You don't know what you're going to do down the road, just doing your job.
I think this is what happens in a lot of our institutions. We think in institutions, and here's a really good analogy. So here's English, and English acts like a really picky eater. And I'm gonna use Arden Oggs, I don't know where she pulled this off, but it was awesome because then I read it, I'm like, yes, it does. The peas go here, the meat will go right here, the carrots will go here, maybe if you have potatoes, they're gonna go here, and they shouldn't touch each other, all right? This is how I'm gonna eat, this is how my plate is. And then you go to our languages, most Indigenous languages, it's like this. It's like, I don't even know the measurements, but here's the moose meat, there's the potatoes, and there's spices, a little bit of salt or whatever it is, right? But here it is. That's what our language is, and it's mixed up, and we're not like that. So when I look at this, and I really enjoyed Simon's explanation, the way he laid it out there, but it was like the silos. We always say that's a health thing. That's not education. Oh, that's social work stuff. No way, that goes over there. No, that's health. Oh, that's mental health. We're really trying to push each other away in our communities, and it trickles down like that. Here's the one last little stat. Most of our relatives, they're leaving the reserve. Already more than half have left the reserve into towns, off the reserve into cities. They're leaving the reserve for possibly maybe better housing, maybe better opportunities, maybe education, maybe something else, right? So again, a lot of our relatives are in the cities. So we have lots of people in Edmonton alone that could be helping our languages. So we need to figure out a way to database them or communicate or hang out like this, more of this stuff all over the place is what that stat means.
Thank you, Kevin, for using that analogy, because the language is a holistic language and it's a spiritual language, and it's not separated like the way the potatoes and the carrots were separated. For us, language is health, language is governance, language is a way of life. When we're going to be teaching language, I find that the easiest place to teach is out on the land. So this term land-based teaching, let's explore that more. The other term I'd like to acknowledge is what we call a structured language. Because when we segregate the words here, there, and in different parts, we're only probably going to be learning one word a week or one word a month. But say this is a family having breakfast. Kigwai mito, wawa, kigwai apatita, tutu sapoy. You know, everything about having breakfast, the language is in there, and it's one structured system. So imagine if you went camping and all those other Cree words or Anishinaabe words within that one segment. When you go to a feast, when you go talk to an elder, things like that, you'll know that language in that structured environment. So we need to teach language the way that those of us that are fluent speakers, the way that we learned, the settings and the environments where we were in. The perfect example is the ceremonies. How do we say this? How do we pray? What do we say? What we don't say in this place? Things like that. To me, that's what a structured language teaching environment would look like. When we go out there and do our land-based teachings, that's what it is. For example, if we taught our students how to tan a moose hide, so everything about tanning a moose hide, the words are there, the language is there. So if elders were talking about tanning moose hide, that student would understand those words. If they were talking about a certain teaching or ceremony, then they would know that those words and that language is there. That is something that I would like to further explore. I'd like to do that when I do start my PhD. So in the future, our students, our young people, will have these steps, these foundations to work on. The truth of it is, my age group, the fluent speakers, we've lost so many elders this year and last year. We got to learn of innovative ways of how to save our languages.
Say miigwech, hi to each one of you. I'd like to maybe just ask any of the participants here if you have any specific questions for any one of our panelists.
My question, or more of a comment, when you're talking about your language, you have to also know that our past is our present as Indigenous peoples, because mainstream looks at us and treats us like we're still in the past. We're constantly continuing to update Sometimes when we talk our language, we don't get lost in that decolonization, because in English, it makes it really hard to focus on the teachings. In my language, you say, ah. It's like you say, ah. But when you say snowshoes, you say, ah, ah. You say, like this, the white teachers. When you're talking your language, you speak from your heart. Because if you get into your head, you get lost and you think you're not good enough. For the teachers who are sharing this, I really feel that what you said about it's a living, breathing document that we must live, and we have to speak to our young people in those land-based teachings. As Indigenous fluent speaker, I can speak 4 different dialects in my language. And yes, you are right. The more north you go, you have to adapt to the language that is spoken. In the Mechoko, they say Ella. In my community, we say Ella. When you make an emphasis on the pronunciation, those are some of the things that you have to record. But I recorded my elders and they told stories. In my community, this young kid was really small when we went to SILR. The teachings on the land-based picking mint on our community on the other reserve was great. But if you pick mint and you pick with your friends, here are the bags, go for it. You don't tell them this is how you do it. They're gonna go and do as much as they can. If they come back with 6 bags, we don't bring anything home for that whole year. Because this young kid picked medicines for the whole community, elders in one community. So we stopped in every house where the elders couldn't pick, and we gave it away. This is some of the lessons that we teach on the land-based teachings, but we don't say, this is the right way to do it. This is just the way our elders have taught us, and we are teaching you, because you're gonna learn the moral of the story. And I can't tell you what it is, but you will remember it after I'm gone. Those are really important lessons. In English, you say, this is a teaching moment, and I'm not gonna miss it. And I'm gonna stick with this kid, whether he likes it or not, because he's gonna learn it. And I'm gonna make sure to spend a little bit extra time on this, because it's a teachable moment. Because when he grows up, he will remember what it means to have respect for the land, what it means to have respect for the elders, for community, what it means to respect myself, because I can pick medicines, and it will stay with me for a lifelong term, and I will never forget those. Masi.
Miigwech for sharing those teachings with us, Molly. Thank you so much. Miigwech.